Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam64, and welcome to the RoboCast. I'm joined alongside,
Steve the American Killjoy.
and unfortunately, Anderson is once again busy. God damn him and his social life. How dare
Yeah.
he have friends outside
how
of this?
how
God,
could he? I thought we were his friends, but no.
unreal, unreal. But we have a adequate Anderson replacement as ever. Sean, welcome back. How are you?
It's been a whole 2 minutes since I was last on a podcast, so I needed to fill those cravings again.
Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me on.
No.
It's great to be back.
Anytime. And we have a guest from the first episode of Bugglebots 2019, or Season 2, whatever you want to call it. Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Jeroen, and hold my beer.
No, cola.
Cola, oh yeah, cola.
Definitely cola. Jeroen, welcome back. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience with the heavyweight machines in various TV shows around the world, but beetle weight is new for you, correct?
Yes, this was my first ever beetle weight.
What do you think of what are the similarities? What are the differences in like from obviously you built lots of heavyweights over the years. You back in the original Robot Wars back in the early 2000s. What's the difference in your mind between the smaller and the bigger weight classes?
I always was a little bit scared to build a small robot. I've done some featherweight attempts, but never a successful one. And funny story, I got convinced I could build a beetle weight because I was working on Petunia. And Misha builds everything so small, there's not enough space inside. So I was like, well, if I can work in this small space for a heavyweight, I could build a beetle weight. Overall, it's... the fun part is you can prototype fast because you can just 3D print things and you have like 40% of your robot ready. I did that because scale was an issue for me. Beer is pretty big for a beetle, but it also has to be 1.5 kilos. So prototyping is small, but the details still take a lot of time to get it right.
Yeah, it was interesting because obviously Tough as Nails, obviously, which is Beer is obviously based off, is a very big heavyweight. Like, obviously, it has to be to grab things. But, like, did you find that difficult as well? Because obviously, you say it is a big beetle weight, but it's still not like, in terms of scale, it's probably not as big relative as the heavyweight is. If you get my drift.
Yeah, it's still too small to grab on most of the robots, but I settled for it being okay-ish, and I got dimensions of other robots, how big they were. I'm like, okay, I can't hold them, but it's fine. Let's build it. It was hard to build. The first one.
Oh, that's good. Good to know. Obviously, we are here to discuss the first episode of the new season.
Yes.
Which starts off with Salanta Frog and Rust in Pieces. I want to talk about the robots a little bit first. Salanta Frog we'll start with. Who was around last year. They obviously didn't do too well in the main competition, but ended up winning the 10-way Dung Beetle Melee. Very good machine. And I think very unlucky not to get some more wins last season. And kind of unlucky in this first fight as well. But it's just, the new robot is just so nice. Nick's done such a good job on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice to see an upgrade of the old Sir Lancer Frog. I know it was a fan favorite last time. He's gone for a 4-bar lifter this time rather than just a flap, they called it in the episode.
Yeah.
And it still has its trusty little lance. And it's a dogged and determined little robot, and I was expecting to see it take a few hits and keep on going. So I was looking forward to its first fight against this. It's the first. No, Weewoo was a clusterbot. You're silly. So yeah, I was interested to see this fight against Rust in Pieces to see how it would tangle, because it really isn't like a rumble, but it almost has that same kind of feel. So
yeah.
I was interested to see how well it would take on two robots at once.
Yeah. What obviously Jeroen, coming from kind of not a clearer perspective, but obviously new to beetles. What do you make of Salanta Frog as a beetle?
I saw it last year because I was in the filming crew.
Oh, yes, you're right.
So last year I filmed everything and I saw all the beetles, but didn't have time to get to know the builders because filming robots is like
it takes a lot out of you. It's not. Yeah.
And I was very impressed when I saw it in the first show, and I had high hopes for it.
It's a damn nice machine. Sean, I mean, anything to add?
I mean, I'm always a fan of when I see like a really nice looking, robust like flipper. It's why I've always wanted, why I for years wanted to see like Foxic, aka Foxtrot, do well, and I think 4 bars are something that are kind of underrated. I'm glad that we're starting to see more of those, and so when I saw like what the how Lancer Frog looked coming into this season, I was really hoping that it would go in and just do really well. To be honest, I had high hopes for it.
Yeah, it's a damn fine looking machine. It just looks so clean and like fresh. But they came up against the Clusterbot Rust in Pieces, as Steve mentioned. It's one of the Bristol Bot Builders contingent in this series. I think this was I think they mentioned maybe their second beetle weight or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the guy said. It was one
I
of
can't remember either.
It was one. It was an early. They're not exactly prolific at beetles. Certainly, maybe ants, but one of their first beetles. For me, I think they did very well. I think it was a really solid effort from them, and the robots were so fast, and Lancer Frog really struggled to keep up with them. And I think obviously the being half the weight, they're going to probably shift a bit quicker than maybe a full size beetle, but you still have to work together and control it well.
Absolutely,
it's a really good effort from them.
Nick said it in his interview at the end of the fight that they really worked well together, these two little robots, these two little doorstops with wheels, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, one of them has a little pokey stick. Actually, I think later in the episode they both have pokey sticks. So that's really becoming. I think we talked about it on the previous the Series 1 review that we did.
Yeah.
That it's really becoming a strong meta in the beetle scene over there, is having a little waggly stick out the front.
Just to guide people around rather than just relying on a wedge.
Definitely. There was one point in this fight that I guess I already alluded to where both wedges pick up Sir Lancer Frog and just drive it across the arena almost like just synchronously, and it was a
really
beautiful moment.
Really good driving.
Definitely, and it's one of those robots where I didn't expect much out of it, but now after seeing it fight, I can see what the hype is about with clusters. That's the thing with a low weight class. I feel like when you have clusters in a higher weight class, it's a little bit more difficult because there's so much mass. Gemini's a very good example of this.
Yeah, so like the difference between say half of Rust in Pieces and Lancer Frog is I think 750 grams or something. Let's say half a beetle weight, 750 grams, whereas it's 100. I think it's like 50 kilo for a heavyweight.
It's a whole different world.
Exactly, it's so different to the amount of the scaling. It probably works in the favor of the lower weight classes to have the cluster bots.
And we saw that a little bit in this fight.
We did indeed. Should we talk about the fight at all?
Yes.
Let's do that. So, Lancer Frog kind of struggled to get underneath them throughout the fight. I think the one cluster had a row of like wedge-lit teeth, which that worked so well because they were just getting under Lancer Frog every time. And Lancer Frog, it seemed like they had I think Nicholas mentioned after the fight he had a gearbox break on one of the wheels, and you can kind of see it turning around in circles. He never really got a clean run. But I mean, I say Rust in Pieces driving was spot on.
Oh, absolutely. It was a really good driving fight. I mean, you wouldn't expect a lot of damage from either of these robots. None of their weapons really can do anything aside from maybe like the wedgelets scraping the paint a little bit. So I mean, it was a driving class, driving masterclass. That was the whole deal. And Lancer Frog just really had a hard time keeping up with the two of them. And even that little antweight that just kind of hung out a little bit did what it was supposed to do. I guess it pressed the pit button.
It worked. I mean, it did the job it needed to do, didn't it? Really.
I will say, it's on the earlier note about like a building effective cluster bot. It does seem like the best way to make an effective cluster bot is to go with that wedge design. You see it like in the heavyweights. You see it with like Crash and Burn, for instance.
Right.
It's just something that seems to work really well, and just being able to take a fair bit of damage whilst being able to overwhelm the opponent. And then on another thing for me was, I didn't realise how big. I sometimes forget how big for what they are, beetle weights are, until I saw that little mini bot around. But yeah, like's been said, it was driven really well. Like, I thought the same. I didn't know what to expect from Rust in Pieces, but I don't think Lancer Frog's. Became very apparent. Lancer Frog didn't really have much of a hope in that.
Yeah. Your own anything to add? I mean, it was very surprising for me at least. I had Lance Frog down to win this quite comfortably. It's Nicholas obviously very experienced, but it didn't quite work out for him this time.
I was part of a cluster team for the Dutch Robot Wars.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, of course you were. V3.
Yeah, V3. Yeah, square root 3 squared something.
Yeah.
And the key is to communicate with other drivers, and you can do that by just driving and as expected by the other one, or just talk to them. And they did it great. They were constantly working together, and that's the hard part. You can see that in the Bugglebots, Iron Watch team. They have the heavyweight cluster robot. I forget the name. I'm so bad at names when I don't have it. And they constantly hit each other and take each other out. And in this team, well, it was just working together from the start. And they're so fast.
Yeah, they did such a good job as well. And absolutely deserved their place in the next round. And I think surprised quite a few people. I think, as I said, I certainly had Lancer Frog down to win the fight. But good driving and Rust in Pieces go through. I suppose we must move on to the next fight. Should we talk about Hold My Beer first? Why not? We'll talk about Hold My Beer.
Sure, yes.
Obviously, was it always in your mind, Jeroen, to go with a Tough as Nails inspired machine?
Yes. I also have featherweight Tough as Nails that run and at one Dutch event, but broke. And, since filming Bugglebots the last time, I was sure I was going to enter this time. So I was drawing it up in SolidWorks and making it work. And it was more for the fun of it. I was sure I wasn't going to build a champion right away, or with that design, even a champion at all. But it was also a challenge for myself. The design is complicated. I will make a video about it because, well, you have the two. It's built like the real Tough as Nails, which has the claws moving and the wheels moving separately. And when I showed up, my table was next to the Halo team, and I showed up with all these pieces because, well, time and and they were ready, and they watched me build Hold My Beer together throughout the Friday. It was together at one point, but I still had to glue everything and do the details. So I was sure it's going to work. And they were just watching me build my robot, and they were ready. And then we found out.
Obviously, it was all a tactic. You were instilling the fear into them. Watching you work away at this robot, ready to kill them. That's what it was, really.
I think at the point we found out we had to fight each other, I was nearly done, and they're like, we have seen him build all day, and now,
now we have to tear it apart.
Yeah, that was, and I was like, okay, I didn't know Halo beforehand, but someone showed me a video of Halo in an American event. I was like, okay.
It was basically the same for me. I had no clue what to expect from Halo, and then I saw a video, and I was like, oh no, when I figured out that you two are going up against each other.
Steve, you have first-hand experience as well of fighting, not Halo, but is it Sit and Spin, their new one?
Hit and Spin. Sit and Spin's a toy you sit on to get dizzy.
Okay, Hit and Spin.
Hit and Spin, yeah. So that robot was a one-wheel bot, and I think it had a weapon that was 255 grams or 235 grams, and the U.S. ant weight limit over here is 454.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Basically, half the robot is the weapon, and I snuck out a win against them, but that's only because that robot was made out of PLA, the body. So I imagine they're going to come with harder plastic next time, and it'll be much better. But I'm glad to have beaten them before they had the chance to do that. Hey, but they're really nice people. Yeah, I mean it's interesting to see them work. There's a lot of technical aspects to this robot, Halo especially,
with the light gun.
Yeah, with a light gun. So they use it. There's a couple of different ways to do a melty brain, where you could actually have accelerometers and gyros and actually figure out where in space your robot is, or you could actually have from your controller an IR beacon shoot lasers at it, basically to tell it where it is in the arena. So there's that. Before I get too far into Halo, I do want to say, Jeroen, that I do appreciate the way you build robots because it's the whole, like, yeah, maybe it's not going to win, but I want to be able to turn heads and be like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? I tend to build robots a lot the same way. So before that, anyway. But Halo, holy crap, this thing spins stupid fast.
It really does.
It's for people who watch Bugglebots before, they think, oh, it's another SCD, you know, it's gonna bumble around, and it did have trouble in this fight to try to move around, but we figured out why after the fight. But once it connected, holy shoot!
I mean, there was one. I mean, I have to say the driving Jeroen in this fight was stellar. Just like you don't want to touch that thing, and it was just brilliant. Just like egging him on, like, come on then, do you want to come and hit me or not? And it was like trying to shepherd him towards the pit. It was brilliant. And I thought for a second, he's just going to bounce off the wall, he's just going to fly in the pit, that's going to be the fight. It's going to be it's game over, but I mean, they got one solid connection, and that's all they needed, really. Talk us through the damage after the fight.
Yeah.
I was rewatching the fight, and my tactics were always to open the pit first before engaging.
Yeah, because it's tough as nails. It's the same tactic, right? So
yeah, and in retrospect, maybe I should have gone for it as soon as it started, because in the video I watched they were up to speed like in a few seconds, but in the fight it lasted a while, so maybe I could have done that, but I was like, no, let's wait for the 30 seconds before I can open the pit and just maybe let them drive to me, but they didn't drive that fast, so I opened the pit and just nudged them with the front of my robot, which worked, and the bad part was they bounced off me, and the front of the robot, it was HDPE 500. It didn't have a lot of damage, but they bounced into the arena wall and straight back into me, and at that point a gearbox broke, so I only had mobility on one side, and they came for me again and gave me a final hit where the wheel was really broken. So they won, and I was thinking, okay, it's just a wheel and just a gearbox, I have spares.
If only.
But while repairing it, everything I opened was bent, or the mountings for the motors were just 3D printed, and I knew that was a little bit of touch and go to use only 3D printed materials for it, but it was the fastest way at that point. And well, they shattered, so there was a lot of tape involved in repairing it. In the back there is the big spindle to open the claws. That was bent. They didn't touch that, but it was just bent before, because it hit the wheels hit the arena wall so hard. I didn't have a spare one of that, so from that point on I could open and close the claws a little bit, but it was limited to 30 millimeters or something. And well, everything was bent. let's just say that.
There was a lot of energy. There was a lot of energy going on, so you can kind of understand that. So yeah,
I was surprised. The wheels, they were just tubing, the silicone tubing, and they were great. It was just the tubing. There was nothing underneath it, and well, you can hit it as hard as you want, but they just deform and they bounce right back, and it's so definitely will keep those. For the HDPE, it was just a cutting board I found online, and it was a higher grade for like restaurants, and they spec'd the material, because if you buy a cutting board anywhere, you don't know what type of plastic it is, and this was HDPE 500, so I looked for that especially, and also that worked great. It didn't break, it is sliced, but everything metal was bent.
So the solution is obviously everything out of plastic.
Right.
I have to say, yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of the fight itself, this is probably the most entertaining like one-hit KO I've seen in ages, because it was just you trying to shepherd it towards the pin. It was brilliant. But it was just so funny. Like I think the amount of cola you needed after that fight would have been severe, I think. Sean, anything to add?
No.
Well, when the thing that I was worried about going into when it was going into that fight was that like Hold My Beer has like these little gaps at the claws, and I was worried that it was gonna like Halo was gonna catch it, and it was just gonna be like destroys the whole thing. So like, to be honest, like Hold My Beer was, like's been discussed, it took the damage a lot better than could be expected given its Halo. So I've got to say this, like, Hold My Beer lost, but I think, I'd like to see how the design can improve itself, because if it was if it was able to hold itself as well as it did now, I think a future version will be, able to take those hits even better, really.
Yeah. I'm excited to see where it goes. We'll move on to our next fight then, which sees the return of the champion K2. Looks-wise, relatively unchanged, but obviously, Mark, you alluded to quite a lot going on different inside, with the slightly better armour on top, and he said a more taut pulley, so everything was a bit more dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very good machine, really, isn't it? There's nothing more to say about that. He's very, very efficient, and he did really well in this fight as well. It's just such a nice looking machine as well.
Yeah, it's a really clean design. I think that's a good description of K2. Uses one of those FingerTech beater bars, which can be really deadly if you get it spinning at a good enough speed and get a good enough bite. And I think with the combination of that and little wedgelets at the front, it tees the robots right up, and you're just kicking them. I was worried about his top armor going against the Shrek. But it was on him the whole time, and Mark's driving was on point. Even the little details on K2 with all the curves and stuff like that. It's just a very clean design. It looks like it was it looks professionally made. Like I could buy this online. You know what I mean?
It looks like a kit. I know someone, I can't remember who it was, alluded to it saying it looks like a kit, but it's not.
It's not.
The only thing that is the beater. That's it.
Right. Yes. It's not a kit. It looks vaguely similar to a kinetic drum kit, but it's not.
It's not the same.
So
no.
it's definitely its own thing, and it shows that the drums are still pretty good.
Absolutely. And their opponents were, as you mentioned, Steve, Maximum Ogredrive. Now, last year, I think a lot of people kind of thought this should have been in the final. It was unlucky not to be in the final. In the end, losing out to Rev 2.
Yeah.
It looks improved. It was improved. There's a lot of new things going on in there. Big new saw on the top as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very unlucky to get drew against K2 in the first match.
Oh,
very unlucky. But I mean, my heart goes out to Sam. It really does, because to get a draw like that, for things just to not work, it's just very, very unlucky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the big saw on top. I mean, it looked like it was. It looked like it was ready. I mean, against the champion, I mean, I guess you can't expect much. You can't expect everything to go perfectly.
No.
But it put up a good fight.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't. It wasn't a good first draw. I mean, you hate to say that.
No, it happens. It happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, it happens. Against another opponent, who knows what could have happened?
Absolutely. Jeroen, I'll bring you in here. Obviously, you saw Sam there. Obviously, worked very hard on the machine. What?
Mm-hmm.
How? It seemed very disappointing for him. Was he disappointed at the time?
I think he was very disappointed. You could see in the fight he went straight for his only real chance for the belt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that took the saw out. And but overall, he spent so much time and energy in his robot. And you can say it looks the same, but it's probably rebuild number 50.
Yeah.
And it's hard on him to see him lose in such a way. Well, this fight wasn't the worst loss. He just his saw went out. The robot worked, but he did the best he could.
Yeah.
And that's okay to lose that way.
Because he does get some good grapples on K2 in this fight. I mean, it's not like he wasn't putting up a fight. It's just the wear and tear in this fight kind of started to show up as it went on a little longer. The amount of times that K2's egg beater starts catching him and starts throwing him around. I mean, it was only a matter of time before those kind of started to add up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's only so much you can do really in a situation like that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was first watching the fight, I was thinking like an armchair builder, if he drives to the side, he'll have it perfectly. But K2 is actually, when I watched it again, and it's just no, K2 is so much faster and so powerful. It like you've said, it was just a really, really bad draw, which is a shame because I think Maximum Ogredrive is a really well-built Sawbot.
Yeah, it is. In any other heat, potentially, obviously, don't know all the competitors, but like in most other heats, you kind of think, okay, Maximum Ogredrive's probably going to be, in the heat final, maybe not, if not winning the heat. It's just unlucky that you get drew against such a tough opponent in round one. Obviously, we'll get to the Rumble in the second.
Yeah. Also, he's running. Mark's running 4S instead of 3S this time, so he's got that much more power.
Exactly.
To draw from. It's that was a huge improvement. So instead of having like 12 volts, you got more like close to 17. That's a huge increase for this weight class.
Yeah, absolutely, and it obviously clearly works in the end. Maximum Ogredrive never really got a good clamp on it. It was interesting to see that Mark was commenting how K2 was very nervous going into the fight, because obviously the top armor on K2 isn't the strongest, and it would have been interesting to see if Maximum Ogredrive had got a nice grapple on it, taken it, got underneath it and give it a nice chew, how it would have done, but never got the chance to, and in the end K2 taking home the W.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the Rumble.
Yes.
Between Hold My Beer, Maximum Ogredrive, and Sir Lancerfrog. Why don't you talk us through the fight, Jeroen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, okay, will I matter in this fight? What to do? I didn't have any expectations going in. I was like, well, let's have some fun. And then Ogredrive died. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that was
like
such a shame.
in the first 30 seconds, and I saw it happen. I was like, oh, great, I got a chance. And at the same moment, I was like, I feel so bad for Sam for this happening.
Of course.
Definitely. Quick question. He talked about it a little bit at the end of the fight. Was it interference that just caused it to cut out? Like all the arena lights maybe and stuff like that?
No, I think it's he swapped some motor out, and the beetle motors, if they're new, you have to run them in a little bit because they spark, and if you don't do that, then something will happen. Not sure what happens, but later on, I heard from repairs that there were stuff in ESC broken, like a back or something was cutting out. I'm not sure what was causing this fight, but it was just one of those things that happens, and it seems to happen a lot to Sam in fights, and not to others. And well, that was the thing. And at that point, it was just Sir Lancerfrog against me, and I couldn't do anything with it. He was under me the whole time, and and in the end of the interview, I mentioned. Both sides of Hold My Beer looked the same. So every time I got flipped, I was confused for a while which side was up.
What's up? What's backwards? What's forwards?
Yes, totally. And when you're near the pit, it's very, very difficult to figure it out with everything happening. Of course, there's some stress involved, and there's a fight. So I tend to focus really on the fight and ignore everything that happens around me. And it worked a bit, but it was poor driving with me. Yeah. So Lancerfrog won.
Mm-hmm. If there was one thing I noticed when I was watching Hold My Beer, I think in this fight, it looked kind of like the drive of it was like, they mentioned that like it's got some good pushing power to it, but it looked like at times the drive was so powerful that it nearly caused it to flip itself over.
Yeah, there's a bit of wheeling going on, wasn't there?
Yeah, I had initially I had magnets in the front of the robot to keep the claws down, but I have no experience, so I just bought magnets, and they were way too big. So it was they hold the front down so well that it just was spinning, and I couldn't really drive. So the plan was to have magnets, but I didn't test that part at home, and that I have to remove them from the robot.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Yeah, just one of those unfortunate things that obviously comes with testing, I suppose. It does mean that you're in the 10-way melee at the end of the year. Is there anything you look back and you think, oh, I could have done this differently, or could have done that differently? Obviously, it was your first beetle build, so you can't really, be too critical. Like, how do you look back at Hold My Beer Mark 1?
Happy with it. It was a fun build, and as I said before, in the Halo fight, I did what I wanted to do. I was just a bit unlucky. The first bounce back was right against me, so that was the end of it. I learned a lot on middleweights. I'm working on a second design that will be more competitive and even more unique. That's something I want to hold in. It will be a tougher Stealth copy, but improvement on it, and more spec to middleweight sizes and everything, and not copying the old pincher design again. But it will be a new way, and I think I was lucky to be there.
Yeah, I definitely want to see it bite some things next year.
Yes.
It needs something to chew on.
It'd be nice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing that, and the frog going through to. Well, I mean, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Our first heat semi-final. Who saw this coming then? So it was between Rust in Pieces and Halo.
Yeah.
And Rust in Pieces absolutely nailed it against Halo.
Yeah.
They absolutely got the driving spot on. They used both pointy sticks when they put the two robots together, it was like a giant dustpan, and it worked really well. And Halo in the end never really got a chance to get a good hit on them, and ended up spinning down the pit. What a absolutely massive turn up that was.
Such a surprise. So the idea when fighting something like this is you just got to stay on them and do not let them get spun up. Immediately hitting the pit button was huge in this fight. It's like once as soon as they were stuck on the pit lip, just getting over there and smacking that pit button and just ending it was probably the smartest thing to do, because any more time you spend in there with a spinner, it's not going to be good. So I think they were both surprised at first that Halo was over near the pit, and then just as the door opened, down it went, and they're through.
It was
crazy,
very surprising. I don't think many people had, because I remember being in the live chat for the episode for the premiere, and a lot of people were saying, it's definitely Halo's fight, because of obviously the very impressive performance that they had against yourself, Jeroen, in the end. But it was just they just never got a chance to get going, and it's a shame, because obviously Halo quite clearly has got a lot of damage potential in the spinner, but Rust in Pieces absolutely nailed it. There's no other way of putting it.
Yeah, I would like to add that this year the pit opening, that's like totally. If you hit the button, there is a button, and the pit opens. So it's not like there could be any producer interference or stuff like that. It just opens when you touch it, and they have an override because the button it can break, and then they will do it by hand. But the timing was just great, and I would like to add, if I was there and I had to press the button, I would feel so bad.
just knowing that they can't move.
Yeah.
Oh,
but it's also why I hate is a strong word, but I'm still not a fan of wedge robots. But in a cluster way, they're really effective, and I'm a little bit in doubt, because I'm strongly for active weapon rule for Bugglebots or any competition that's more of a show than a real competition.
Yeah.
And I think Bugglebots is a bit of both, but at the end the robots get picked, and wedges have such a strong advantage most of the times. But if it's a cluster and you perform this well, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think that was a good point. Obviously, as much as they don't have an active weapon, the activity is there's two of them rather than just if it was just one big wedge, it probably wouldn't get in.
Yeah. I actually remember in the video I watched about Halo before Bugglebots, I remember one of the robots it actually had trouble with had something very similar to the lances that you see in Bugglebots, where it's just because with those sometimes it can be a struggle to hit anything meaningful for them. So it was something where I'd expected Halo to win, but in hindsight I looked at it and I was like, actually no, that does make sense that they came through and on top again. That's the thing. This clusterbot is one that I didn't think a lot of going in, but really, it's very well designed.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did such a good job as well. And making it to the heat final. Halo aren't out. Obviously, we found out as well there is a slight twist to this year's format. There is a 10-way rumble of all the losing heat semi-finalists, and the winner of that goes then into a 6-way rumble of all the losing heat finalists as well to try and get into the grand final. So if Halo's going to win it the hard way, if they're going to end up winning Bugglebots this time around, but
yeah. That's going to be tough because that robot has a lot of space.
Exactly, they haven't got the centre of the arena to kind of to chill in, so it's going to be tough for them to do it. But we'll see how they get on at the end of the year. You never know; they might end up surprising us all.
Who knows?
Our second heat semi-final saw champions K2 against the newly reinstated Sir Lancerfrog, or progressing from the losers rumble into round 2, and once again just didn't really get a chance to get going, and K2 just imperious, just smashing the back panel off, breaking the link, job done.
Yeah.
Heat final.
Yeah. The box rush did not work this particular time.
No.
It was 2 seconds, and immediately I saw this. I'm like, that's it. K2's gonna take this. He's just gonna. This is just like a lamb to the slaughter. Or a frog to the lily pad pond. Yeah. Something like that. I just felt bad. I mean, it was just. We all basically witnessed a frog murder. It was so clinical, and the frog didn't get a chance to get the flipper working. Really didn't get a chance to get the wedge underneath K2 very often, and it was just Mark taking it out, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, it was a driving masterclass. Really, but once again, there's no disgrace for Nicholas going out like this, because there's nothing he could have done differently. It's just on the day the robot he came against was just ultimately better driven. That's just the way it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh man, K2 is a scary robot, and it might be way too early to make this prediction, but unless like one of the future heats, I haven't seen what's coming up in the future heats, but like unless there's something that is just as worrying, I would probably put money on K2. Doing like what Bite Force and Chaos 2 have done in the past and winning 2 in a row.
It's gonna be tough to beat, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Jeroen, anything to add to this fight?
No, I think most is said, and well, we'll see who became the new champion. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, fair enough. We'll move on then to the heat final. Obviously, Lancerfrog going into the 10-way rumble with Halo, K2 progressing to a heat final against probably the surprise package in Rust in Pieces.
Yeah.
And Rust in Pieces once again didn't really get a chance this time. It was the tactic they had against Halo was obviously brilliant. They were able to get underneath K2 fairly quickly. They just couldn't get underneath Halo quite quickly, but they couldn't get under K2. K2 knocking one out, and while the one's being counted out, flipping the other one out of the arena was spectacular. That was very, very good. I don't know if for the ruling of Bugglebots there was a 51% or 55% rule or whatever else. So right. If it was going to be, if one died, then both died, but it didn't really matter in the end, did it? Because one was out and one was dead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of those things when you have a cluster bot. The bot is much lighter,
and you can see
you're able to have it kicked around. Yeah, and I was expecting something similar when they fought Halo. I figure, they just don't have the weight, to not be kicked around like just dust off the shelf. You know what I mean? But it was just another K2 beatdown. I feel like these last 2 fights for K2, it was all K2. And they were just moving things around and then just cleaning up the arena, for the next fight. And I feel that it was just another reason to explain why Mark won last year with this robot. It's clearly up to the test, and I can't wait to see who he faces in the grand final. I can't wait to see maybe he'll get some kind of a test in the grand final, because it seemed like it was just too easy for him this time.
Yeah, which is surprising considering the standard of the heat. Really, it's
right. Yeah, definitely.
Very, very impressive indeed. Yeah. Anything more to add, gents? I mean, really, it was unlucky on Rust in Pieces' part, but you progress that far into the competition, you kind of think, okay, you're going to end up with something quite scary. They've already dealt with something quite scary in Halo, and not much more you can do really. Yeah,
it really like it was said, the caliber of robots has definitely gone up. Like, it was already great in the first season, but it's definitely gone up. And if anything, that does just say just how scarily good K2 is, where the standard of Bugglebots, like the competition in it, is that much higher. yeah, K2 just demolished it, sweep the floor with a lot of them. So that's really like that's why that's why I made my prediction on K2, because it's like unless something really does just bring the fight, I don't know what could be done with it.
He does have the disadvantage that people know about him this year, and they know how good it is, so they have tactics and maybe design against it.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that. Yeah,
I think for me, it's so impressive that first of all the robots in this heat were just stunning. They were all really nice to look at. They were all really good, high quality. Nothing to take away from last year, but like as Joe mentioned when we did the Series 1 podcast a couple of weeks ago.
By the way, go watch that.
Yeah, that wasn't a plug, I promise. But like when he said there were only 30 working robots there, and like some of them were a bit weaker than others, you can kind of see that. Obviously, we bring up Good Boy as a legend because it is a legend, but like it was very much a Felix bought it with him as a last resort sort of thing. This year, all 6 of these robots are just stunning to look at. They've all got huge amounts of personality, and they're just so well built, and it was a great first heat, and it was a really good way to kick things off. I have to say as well, the way the show looked as well this time, just everything was so much cleaner, so much. It just a general all-round improvement. The production staff obviously deserve a massive credit for that as well. So thank you for that, and long may it continue. K2 in the final, Rust in Pieces in the now 6-way rumble I suppose, but 5-way rumble at the end of the series. And looking forward to next week. Hopefully it will be just as good as this week.
Definitely.
Jeroen, I'm going to come to you quickly. Obviously, didn't quite work out this time, but obviously you said already that you're building another beetle.
Designing it, yes.
Are you, has this kind of piqued your interest more for the lower weight classes at all?
Yes, but I have to divide my time between the big ones and the small ones. So,
of course.
We don't have a lot of beetle events in the Netherlands or Belgium at the moment. It's growing, and there are more and more beetles here. And driving up to England every time is just not an option anymore.
It's a big commitment, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, but the good thing is about beetles, you can practice at home with them, and obviously driving is a big part of them. You can build the best robot, but if you drive like I did in the first round,
it was brilliant driving. What are you on about? It's perfect driving.
It doesn't help, so it piqued my interest, and a big part of it is Bugglebots, because I'm not one of that wants to. I think I wrote it down last week somewhere on Facebook. I'm not in it for the attention or to entertain people, but it is really fun to entertain, and if you can be part of something like this, and if you see the amount of effort the production like Ben and Joe put into it, it's just great to see the end result, and that really helps also to get motivated to build something unique for the show.
Absolutely, and as I say, it's fantastic to see everything coming together so nicely. With that said, though, that pretty much sums up the first episode of Bugglebots 2019. Jeroen and Sean, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's been great to be on, and this was a wonderful episode to talk about.
It really was. There's just so much going on, and I say long may it continue. Hopefully, we'll see some more good stuff next week. But until then, I've been Sam Elliott64.
I've been Steve the American Killjoy.
I'm TheDominusIgnis.
En ik ben de gekke Nederlander.
and hold our beers. We'll see you next week for Heat 2. I'll see you then. Bye bye.
Try and cancel this one, BBC.
Like that's staying in.
Yes.